No,
This would. I'm talking about.
Is this like an intergovernmental meeting? Was it an intergovernmental meeting?
Yeah, we just said, we're all walking and and then we'll worry about it.
I saw the article that said that it could take 3 or 4 years for a permanent board on maybe.
You know, she scheduled a meeting between after very contentious waiting to talk about it and found advice that can't figure that out. Flip it.
Just like
You know a relationship with
It's 6 o'clock. Are we ready? Let's go. Bathrooms are located in the corner through the double doors. Emergency exits right there in the back of the room. If you haven't already signed in, please sign the white attendance sheet on the podium back in the meeting room. The meeting is available via live stream via the Diligent Community platform on the Winnetka Park District website. Please note the chat feature is not monitored. Public comment accepted in person. A link to the video will be posted to the Diligent Community website next week. This is a business meeting, or after your cooperation to maintain quorum, please be considerate. Refrain from interrupting board members and other speakers. I would like to call to order the January 26, 2023 regular board meeting at 6 p.m.
Commissioner Archambault.
Here.
Commissioner Lusson. Commissioner Rapp.
Here.
Commissioner Root.
Here.
Commissioner Seaman. Commissioner Kodo.
Here.
Commissioner James.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Financials. May I have a motion to approve the December 2022 financials? So moved. For second?
Second.
Motion to second. Discussion, Jim?
Well, we finished 2022 in very good position, despite the Cook County tax delays. We are officially $222,000 below our year-to-date budget. That's due specifically to the tax delays and the lack of donations that were budgeted for 2022. If you factor that back into the tax money back into the equation, we finish almost $3 million above our operating budget. So we were in a good position for performance. That's one side note I want to mention is that we received most of that tax money earlier than anticipated. So we've now received $2,307,215 of the $2,425,306 that we were owed. So we've received almost 90% of the tax money here in the month of January. So we're probably starting to
Catch up.
Yes.
When do you expect the balance?
I would expect most of it in February, and that they're ahead of the schedule. So I'm expecting the balance to be in by end of next week. We're making weekly deposits. So.
Excellent. Outstanding. Any questions for Jim? Hearing none, roll call please.
Commissioner Archambault.
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp.
Yes.
Commissioner Root.
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo.
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Vouchers. May I have a motion to approve the vouchers for $954,700.27 as presented? So moved.
Second.
Discussion, Jim?
These vouchers wrap up the 2020, the vast majority of the 2022 expenditures. There are still some invoices we are waiting on from some of our vendors, so the books are not closed yet. We will probably close the books in early March, but the vast majority of what we were anticipating has arrived, and is being paid out accordingly.
Any questions on the vouchers?
tell me what was involved in that?
That was the invoice through the end of November. We're still waiting for the December billing. That's what
Okay.
the invoices were
All right.
for. I do not have it with me, so I don't have
The detail, well, maybe council can help us on your November invoice. Mr. Adams?
So is that October time you're talking about, or is that November time?
It's-
Probably October time.
October and November. I don't know.
So I know we had 2 lengthy board meetings. We had many Freedom of Information Act matters pending at that time. We were involved in a lot of different contractual discussions. I think I can't remember, was there any Kemper going on in October?
A little bit, yep.
Yeah. I couldn't, just off the top of my head, I know there's a handful of different topics that we were involved in. I think FOIA took quite a bit over the last several months. So
Thank you.
happy to look into that further and talk to you about it offline if you want.
Thank you very much.
I'd actually broken that down, Commissioner Root, I can send that to you. I
Thank
broke
you.
down by category, what had come in from Robert Schwartz.
And as long as we're on that topic, we were trying to stay current with our Elder and Centennial cost breakdown.
So we'll jump ahead to that, so the elder.
Well,
Let's-
is that, we're gonna discuss that later?
Yeah,
Great,
right in here.
super,
Yeah.
thank you so much, thank you.
I just want to say one procedural thing about vouchers. I think you're moving into the voucher role, the voucher review role, Cynthia Rapp, and I want to thank you very much for that. And I do want to advise you that the vouchers are a giant stack, and you can review all of the individual pieces of the vouchers as a commissioner. I know, it's a joyous, and, yeah, it's a joyous.
Dr. Jim might be like, oh my goodness, we should run for the idea.
No, I think it's a good exercise. It gives you a really good idea of, what gets billed for camp and how they manage it. And it's really informative. It's how all these numbers for the budget get built.
It was hard to say no when David was asking, so would you like to take this over?
'Cause
Knowing
I've
that he has rolled
done
off and he has done it and
for a
served on
year.
this for,
Yeah.
yes,
And
yes.
he took it over from me. It was supposed to be rolling. So your turn, maybe. We might be just be moving around the
Well,
table.
maybe like we do with committee of the whole, we could alternate,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah,
That could
that's
work.
always open.
So Commissioner Root, $7,999 on FOIA, litigation matters, $3,111, tax levy, $532, regulatory matter, $969, capital projects, $1,444, real estate property exchange agreement, $5,734, board matters, Commissioner Thomas, $160, commissioner matters, $418, and employment matter, $171, for a total of $20,539.
Thank you so much, we appreciate that, Jim, right?
If you'd like it, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any further, just one comment, so I did a lot of questions to JP today about the payment for the paddle tennis courts. And I forgot that we put that money in advance from that board coach. So it was $80,000. I got the money, I just didn't know if anyone else was gonna question it, so I thought I'd get it before the meeting. So JP Emor, thank you for refreshing my mind. That was good. And by the way, you look great. Yeah. Very good. All right, if there's no further comments on the vouchers, we have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes,
Commissioner Kodo,
Yes.
Commissioner Archibald,
Yes.
Commissioner James.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, we'll move on to remarks from visitors. There will be 2 different times we can address the board. Remarks from visitors is your opportunity to address the board on any issue. When called upon, come to the center position in front of the commissioners. Please state your name for the record and speak directly to the board. Keep all comments under 3 minutes. Remember, this is not a question and answer forum, so please do not expect a response or answer from the park board this evening. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use the comments card, which are available near the sign-in sheets. And any park district staff will accept your card and be shared with the board. Who would like to go first?
So I have a question, do we have a microphone? Or how do we get recorded?
It will pick up your voice.
Okay,
Okay, there's mics around the room, see one right here by the table? That'll pick you up. That little black thing.
Yeah.
right, so, you know, I am the one that has asked for transparency from you all many, many times. And on January 18th, you put up a fence at Centennial and Elder. Today is the 26th. You've had 9 days to notify the board of the fence. And I'm guessing if you put up a fence in the middle of January, in the freezing cold, there had to be some stipulation why you put up the fence, but I'm not sure. And I'm guessing it would be with Orchard 2020, but I have no idea. And I feel like you promised that you would notify the board when you took over for Colleen, that you would tell all the commissioners about all the deals and everything that was going on. And so, you know, I would call when the fence went up and ask, what's going on? And no one knew. No one knew about the fence. No one knew why a fence would go up in the middle of January. And I'm looking for transparency, and I've asked for this from day one. Secondly, we wanted a coastal engineer to review the process. And then we get a proposal, and Shabika and Red Barn submitted an independent proposal in 2019. He's a one-man show in Waunakee, Wisconsin, as far as I can tell from Googling him. And in his RFP, he's a civil engineer, not a coastal engineer. It was a joint application with he and Shabika, and he's reviewing Shabika's proposal. And so how do we do an independent review with that? We wanted a coastal engineer. We were supposed to submit an RFP to a coastal engineer legally. And finally, the proposal contained a comment about a park commissioner. That alone appeared intimidating and wrong. That should have been he should have been kicked out for that comment about a park commissioner. We don't know which one they were talking about. But he doesn't do hydrodynamics, as he was asked at the workshop meeting. So, when I look at the fence, and the last thing is, at the workshop, it was overheard that John had mentioned that millions were donated to the park from an anonymous donor. The park commissioners also do not have that information. So of course I called and said, how much did they donate? Who donated it? Well, what was the amount? What was it for? So no one seems to know anything. I called, they're like, can't talk, don't know anything. So we want transparency at the utmost importance. There was a fence put up in the middle of the night. There was a deal that was done that we don't know about, and there's a RFP that was, I believe, not probably legally binding, that, and all of it probably had stipulations because you wouldn't put up the fence in January.
I'm going to break with decorum, and I'm going to answer or let you know that the fence matter will be discussed later in the agenda. It is on the agenda.
But I didn't know that.
It is on the agenda.
Well, I haven't looked at it.
Okay. The coastal engineering matter will also be on the agenda, so do please stick around so we can have public comment. With respect to millions in donations to the park district, that is a flat-out falsehood. So I don't know where you got that information, but that is totally inaccurate, and for you to suggest
I'm asking.
it's not accurate, it's a false statement. We'll move on to the next speaker.
Well, Katie took my thunder. So Irene Smith, 1087 Elm Street. It's the fence posts that I want to talk about, although Katie has already discussed it. I don't need to remind you, they were installed on Wednesday of last week, the 18th. It reminded me, do you remember that fateful day that Meg's Field was destroyed? 20 years ago, at the end of March, 20 years ago. And you know what Mayor Daley, the father, said? He contended that the decision was made to prevent terrorists from using the field as cover to mount an attack. Is that what you were thinking? Because you did this so quickly. What was the haste in this thing? The mystery concerns this haste in your installation of all these bits and pieces. Were you too worried to bother about getting the required permits for such an undertaking? The village informed me that no permit requests were submitted, none. Luckily, a few observant neighbors saw the work being done at Centennial. The village was informed, and they issued a stop work order. The village informed me that no permit requests had been filed at all. So why did this happen? The good news is, yesterday in the cold, your employees went down in the water and removed everything. So the posts are gone, the connecting wire mesh is gone, but there were no permits, and you gotta get a permit, as you know. There are things, the design review board has to look at fences all over Winnetka, even in our parks. And then you need to get a permit from Winnetka and from the IDNR, and probably the ACE, I don't know. But the IDNR said, yeah. So that's a question. Thank you.
Next speaker.
I will.
Sherry Molitor, 1133 Scott in Winnetka. Thanks for Saturday and your time. I was surprised at the displays, so many of them regarding beach unification. With the holidays and everything else, maybe I missed something, but I thought that the board had voted on to move forward to restore Elder Beach and the Centennial Bluff. And it, quite frankly, seemed like a sales pitch for beach unification and acquiring 261 Sheridan. I was also very surprised to see on one of the displays a note about 261 possibly becoming a private or public event space. Never heard that before. Regarding the fencing, it's really disappointing and a lot of wasted taxpayer dollars and park district resources. And the fact that the village of Winnetka had to work with an intergovernmental body, or didn't, you guys didn't, with the village and your intergovernmental bodies, and they had to issue a stop work order. There's a lot of confidence in this process that's been depleted, but I think that kind of nails it right there. So I'm glad you intend to discuss it. Last time, around 2005, 2006, when this unification issue first came up via advisory referendum, it was shot down about 2-1, from what I recall. And that was before the improvements at Tower and Lloyd. 1.3 miles away. I run, so I know that it's 1.3 miles away. 1.3 miles. We don't need to duplicate. Right there, the mission statement. The Park District mission is to offer diverse programming and protect open lands. This, $12, $15 million project it could swell to does not do either of those things. It doesn't offer diverse programming. You asked for feedback Saturday through February 7th, so I'm assuming that no decisions will be made until then. And I'm assuming you will share that feedback with the greater community. Our beaches aren't crowded. They're not. So to take on a project like this that isn't necessary without measurable public approval doesn't seem to be the right way to move forward. Other park districts in surrounding areas have, we've said it before, pickleball, aquatics. They have fee-based, which I think earns some good money, before and after school childcare. There are a lot of two-income families these days, more so than some of us who are a little bit older. And that's very necessary. We don't have anything like that. Glencoe and Wilmette still have sailing. I'm told by some board members and some staff members, oh, well, we didn't have the staff, we can't. All four of my kids love sailing. I sell clients about Winnetka and I talk about the sailing program. How in the world can you staff this giant beach you want to plan if you can't staff a morning sailing and an afternoon sailing classes? We live on the lake, we should have sailing. Finally, we've heard a lot about disability access and how important that is, and that the combination.
Your 3 minutes, please wrap up.
Okay, I'm right now, thank you. the combination of the, you know, how important that is. And I think everybody agrees with that. So perhaps it's time now to look at that for Tower or Lloyd. It could be accomplished probably as soon as this summer and at a fraction of the cost, and allow those with disabilities to maybe have a boardwalk to the water's edge. So again, thank you. Please do what the community wants, not what you guys want. Thanks.
Would you like to speak next? All right, hearing no further comments, we'll move forward. Without objection, we'll act on the following items with a single vote. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? So moved. Let me read them, sorry, Chris. 6.1, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of December 1st, 2022. Closed session meeting minutes of December 1st, 2022. The special board meeting minutes of December 1st, 2022. The closed session special meeting minutes of December 1, 2022. The regular board meeting minutes of December 15th, 2022. The closed session meeting minutes of December 15th, 2022. Motion to approve all minutes as presented. So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
I do believe that there was a request by Commissioner Rapp to pull the December 1st regular minutes. I don't know, you can
Oh, I
state.
didn't, no.
Okay.
I did not make the request, but I just wanted to note in these minutes, there's a very clear statement that there's an encroachment on the Crow Islands location. I know that we will be talking about that in more detail, but in the interest of making sure that we do have accurate information that is covered by the joint special use permit for the first grade playground. And so I just wanted to, you did say that in the minutes, so it is accurately reflecting what was said, but it is not accurate information, so
Technically, it is accurate. There is another encroachment that's been identified. So it may not be the one I spoke to, but we're still waiting on there are two parts to this answer. First is that there is a special use permit acknowledging that the first grade playground is built upon property owned by the Park District. That is the special use permit issued by the village. We are waiting, and we've asked for many months, and I think they're going to be able to produce a record of a document between the two entities that describes the liability exposure of the Park District. So the special use permit says, yes, it was carefully considered, but we're still looking for the document.
And I provided you, I believe, with a copy of the ordinance for the special use
Yes,
permit.
the special use permit. Thank you, that was very helpful.
Well, I appreciate
Yeah.
you finding it, it was fun. Okay, page 3 of 6, under Elder and Centennial, John.
Is this still the same?
Same
meeting
minutes,
Okay.
yeah, December 1st. And again, I think these are changes, if we all agree, that can be done quickly. But under Elder and Centennial, there's a reference that Mr. Tulis discussed the Cook County Animal Control ordinance and the Dermot requirements to properly secure a dog park as directed by board motion in November 27th, 2022. We didn't have a board meeting on November 27th, 2022. We had one in October. Yeah, and I think it's somewhat deceptive to say that because that was not the motion of October 27th. Actually, the motion that's on page 5 of the October 27th minutes is to amend the Winnetka Waterfront 2030 Lakefront Master Plan to include a dog beach at the south end of Centennial Beach. And then if you kind of dig into the detail, we talk about that the dog beach must include a secure boundary. We don't really identify a fence. So perhaps this needs to be amended simply to reference the motion that's on page 5 of 12 of October 27th, rather than such a clear statement that there was a discussion of fencing. Same page, there's a reference, Commissioner Root recommended the Park District reach out to Soren at the Army Corps. His surname is Hall, you might want to put that in. And then Commissioner Root recommended that written comments be prepared and submitted. This was respect to Orchard 2020. I commented about planter application at 205 Sheridan. But I also, my main comment was concerned about the height of his proposed brick line. And if that could be reflected, I'd appreciate it.
The video I think that Costa has on that December 1st meeting does reflect that he talked about the fence, and in fact, Mickey asked about whether or not permits were required, so that's why it was included as is. I'll certainly add the Soren Hall piece and the other pieces.
Well, I think you ought to properly reflect the motion of October 27th, which was to include a dog park or a dog beach, to keep a dog beach. We were amending the plan with dog beach. I mean, the language is in.
In keeping with Cook County regulations.
Well, if you,
I think it's appropriate to reference the specific language in the motion that was passed on October 27th, and that might help address some of the concerns. There were
it
four
never referenced
Okay.
the Cook County ordinance in that motion. And we can argue about this, but I don't want to take.
We'll come up, there
more
is a
time to do
special,
that.
there is an item on the agenda to
We can
address
talk
this.
about that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and my concern is when we start focusing on specific ordinances and we don't focus on other laws, rules, and regulations, maybe we need to be a little broader and say that we're focused on adherence to all law, rules, and regulations. We can talk about it at the appropriate
Yeah,
time. Thank
I'm
you.
going to address the minutes. You have specific line items in the minutes that you want to amend this motion? Can you distill it down to specific words?
She said you did. I just did.
November to October, November to October, right?
November to October.
Right, and then Soren needs a surname.
Well, no, wait a minute, November to October, and that is the first full paragraph on page 3 of 6, where we're going to reference the actual motion that was made on October 27th. Because it's somewhat deceptive to think that, you know, that was the motion to install a fence, it was not.
No.
Okay. Secondly, we're adding, Soren, his surname, Hall. And then at the very end of that page, my real focus was the height of 205 Sheridan's proposed break line. So if they can be included and everybody's okay with that, I think we're done.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, a second, and amendment. Is there any opposition to the amendments? Hearing none? Roll call?
Commissioner Rapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Root,
Yes.
Commissioner Kodo,
Yes.
Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner Archambault.
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to communications.
So the board packet has, a number of communications in it that I think Kyle, you made a slight update on some of those communications. So certainly the Chicago Tribune with some reporting from those that are in our visitor group today. So we also had a Cranes Communication article as well. So they're all included. Continue to try and keep an eye on all the communications that are out there, so continue to add.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, updated Elder Lane and Centennial Beaches workshop / open house.
I think it was, more than 200 people showed up for the Saturday event. I know, a number of staff members worked very hard, as well as commissioners, to make that come to life. And the meeting from 10, it ended up going from, instead of 10 to 1, it went from 10 to about 1:30. And we're in the process of collecting feedback from that session, not only from written communications from those who attended, also summary emails that have come in from the commissioners, as well as some emails that have come in from our contact email system. We'll keep that open until February 7th. We're working to then aggregate the raw data, as well as to aggregate the information and distill it accordingly. So it was an unbelievable session. Huge recognition to Costa Catulus, and she's not here, but Gracie Durham was working side by side with Costa the entire way, and others were involved as well. But great props to Costa and Gracie. So
would like to add my thanks to Costa and the staff. It was a significant effort. We had 6 different stations in the room, each addressing a different topic, starting with the Lakefront Master Plan and the history, and going through the current design, the dog beach designs, the ADA accessibility, and some further exhibits regarding the property exchange agreement. There were several experts that we invited to attend, and they included Matt Wright, Red Barn Engineering, professional engineer with an area of expertise in coastal engineering.
That we can talk about.
We can talk about that, yes. And then there's also Charlie Shabika, who I think we all know, member of the community, PhD in geology, with extensive experience in coastal design. There was also we had Craig Culp from NSSRA, executive director, and
Tom Burke.
yeah, well, I was gonna go to John McGovern of WT Group. We have ADA consultants to advise us, provide ideas and input on ADA access. And finally, Thomas Burke. Thomas Burke is a preeminent expert with Christopher Burke Engineering. When the MWRD has questions, they come to Thomas Burke. He's our consultant, and he is working with us on the design of the stormwater discharge. He was the one that previously prepared those plans. So I thought the dialogue was terrific. All commissioners were in attendance, and each of the commissioners occupied a different station and was available. It's kind of like a very large, meet the commissioners. And then, of course, with these experts and then staff. We also had 2 members of the Lakota team, and they conducted workshop sessions. So they were able to convene in small groups and gather input and discuss different ideas. And they will be bringing forth those ideas. And again, we'll have comment open through February 7th. And then we will come back on our meeting on the 9th and discuss it in greater detail at that time. I thought it was a huge success. And I need to make a couple of special mentions. Morgan Hardy of the Lakota Group, bless her heart, was her wedding week. So she worked through Wednesday tirelessly and then took the rest of the time off so she could go get married on the day. That's why she wasn't there. And to Costa Catullus, who, as always, went above and beyond, working into the wee hours and picking up some clerical errors at the last minute, having to reprint boards early in the morning. So that's why that packet didn't get out until the day of. So appreciate your consideration. There were a lot of people putting forth a great deal of effort, especially Costa. So all the slides are available. There's a ton of information there to consider, including some really interesting visual examples. There were 2 different exhibits to try and demonstrate the scale. I would encourage you all to look at those carefully. You can fit the entirety of Lloyd Beach, 730 feet end to end, within Elder and Centennial, and still have 270 feet left over. It's 1,000 feet end to end, and there was examples of how we could program that successfully with 3 different uses. So do please study that, and we look forward to getting further input.
It's
Anybody
all
else?
on the web. Share it with your friends. It's really well done. They did a really nice job. The other thing I would strongly recommend is the January 10th meeting with the village, because the village started at baseline with the Army Corps and the IDNR, the village attorney, village manager, and the community development manager. And I thought that presentation was also excellent. So those are 2 fun things to do as it's snowy outside.
Yeah, those were really well done, those presentations in 10. I would echo Christina's comments and also direct you to the March 24th, 2022 board meeting that was held here in this room, where there were 3 different presentations. And the Shabika presentation will supplement what you learned and put visuals to what you heard from the Army Corps and the IDNR. There were a couple other concepts that were introduced by Shabika, one important being lake bed down cutting and the impact that has long-term on the shoreline. So do please go back and review those, and very, very instructive. All right. Any other comments?
Can we also please thank Anya, Kyle, and Taylor, because you all were wonderful, you worked tirelessly, and you took your weekend. So I think you need some recognition. I'm going to applaud you.
All right. We'll move on to the update on the selection of coastal engineer for Elder Lane and Centennial Beach. Costa?
Board, thank you. As we continue to collaborate with Matt Wright to work through the proposal, currently I have a draft form of this proposal. Him and I went through, clarified a lot of points through that proposal, what should be included, what not should be included, how it should be identified per the RFP. Second follow-up went through, so I have a draft copy back. Our next step is to engage and draw up a contract with that. Once I have that completed with a contract, I'll be distributing that part to the park board, hopefully late next week is my objective. I was on the phone with Nicole Karras earlier today from Robin Schwartz's office to help construct that contract, and then be able to distribute that to the board for their review prior to the February 9th board meeting. It's my hope that we can come to a decision with the board to drive toward the selection and then approval for the February 9th board meeting to continue on the process and start to get Elder underway.
There were some questions raised earlier. I know we went through this at the last board meeting. Can you please explain the selections process?
Sure. Through the Winnetka Park District, it was brought to the staff's attention to seek out a coastal engineer. At that point in time, staff put together an RFQ, request for qualifications for people that are qualified to complete this work. That information was put together. There's a cursory review that went out in front of the park board. There were some additional edits and changes. Those edits and changes were made, and then that went live to the public. Upon that, there was a initial kickoff meeting for that, where 3 firms did come in. There was GZA, Baird and Associates, as well as Red Barn Engineering. Upon completion of that, each firm submitted their proposals. There was then identified and reviewed based on the base criteria. All 3 firms meet the required data to be able to move into the next step. That next step was an interview process. There was a panel of 7 Park District employees who sat in on that process, 5 of which are seated at the table with me tonight, or 4 of which are seated at the table with me tonight, along with 2 other members of my team, my operations manager as well as my facility managers. When we complete that process, it was instructed that everybody, review on your own take. There was no direction. There was just the criteria that was given to them in the form of a questionnaire and the proposals that were reviewed. The interviews were set up. Red Barn, GZA, and then Baird had completed the interviews. After that, everybody took their time to distill, review their thoughts, put that together. We then followed up the next day where we sat down and reviewed all that information. Everybody went through their points, they put their scores together, and then those scores were given to me that afternoon to tally up. On that tally, we had reviewed that Red Barn was the highest based on the criteria of the 7. They came in at 88.14 on average, where Baird was second at 83.43, and GZA was at 82.43. To take into a further review, I did rerun the scores without John or myself, who were probably most involved in the project. So without John or my scoring, Red Barn came in at 88.8, GZA came in at 84.4, and Baird came in at 83.8, just to kind of run that for a visual review. Based on the reviews and the initial calls I had made for references, had glowing references for Red Barn and Shabika, based on what I heard from Kenosha, as well as what I heard from the Fossmore Park District. Very confident in their capability, scope of work, knowing who they are and what they provide after going through the review process, comfortable moving forward with Matt Wright and his abilities as a civil engineer. Now, I will note that Matt's
Can you
engineering.
speak to, in Illinois, the licensure and the professional qualifications?
Correct. So in the state of Illinois, there is no such thing as a coastal engineer recognized. From everything that I've researched and I've reached out to, all coastal work has been completed and is filed under a civil engineering background and a civil license. Redburn's Illinois license is up to date to meet the qualifications, as well as Matt Wright's license to meet the qualifications in its current state. We did review all the data, and like I said, we identified Red Barn as the most qualified. From there, we presented that information to the park board in a high-level review similar to this. There was some discussion as far as the qualifications based on other people's review and their own opinions on what they've reviewed with the data. I was instructed to have a quote-unquote straw poll, if you will, to support staff in their decision, and that's where I've been moving with the process so far. If there's any other questions, I'd love to be able to follow up.
So I corroborate what Costa said. We asked each of the entities, is there a coastal engineer? And they said, no, it's a civil engineer with some level of coastal competence. There was one firm with a coastal scientist, but there was no coastal engineer by title. They just had the subject matter expertise as a civil engineer.
To echo Executive Director Peterson, that question was asked of each of the presenting firms. Does Illinois recognize a designation as coastal engineer? Each answered no, they are all civil engineers with expertise in coastal engineering.
Any further questions on the selections process?
Just one. I think, were you surprised when only 3 people responded to the RFQ?
I wasn't necessarily surprised. I was hopeful that we would see more. Hay and Associates was another one that picked up the bids, and the bids were distributed further with third-party contract or contacts that pick up the bids and disseminate them amongst the those teams. But at this time, there was just the 3. So yeah, I was not necessarily surprised, but those were kind of the players in this area.
Is it a big, I mean, it just is a smaller community.
Right. There's not a lot of work to be had done for coastal perspectives. If we were looking for civil engineers, I'm sure our list would have been pages upon pages.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks.
Colleen?
I have just read your statement. I sent a memorandum out to you, Mr. Catoulis, you, Mr. Peterson, all members of the board. And what I was doing was looking at, going back to October 27th, when we started, well, this really goes back to the summer. It goes back to the summer in August, when we started talking, and I was the one talking about, let's have an independent review of this coastal design by a coastal engineer. And it was Mickey, Commissioner Archibald, that said, let's have a peer review. And so I went back to the October 27th minutes and to the motion, and the instruction to staff was to authorize the Director of Parks and Maintenance, Costa Catoulis, to secure design proposals for Elder and Centennial from the Lakota Group, Shabika and Associates, and to move forward with a request for proposals for a third-party coastal engineer for consideration and vote. Now, this was my motion, and I will express my intent. The board was very clear that you have consultants, Shabika and Associates and Lakota, that unanimously we agreed that we wanted to continue on with them because they've been part of the Waterfront 2030 plan. My intent was that there was going to be an independent and neutral engineer who would come in who had no association with our venerable consultants, Shabika and Associates, and Lakota. I had the opportunity, a week ago Wednesday, to come in and review the proposals, and thank you, Mr. Peterson, for sharing them and letting me review them. When I did, and this is in the attached memo that I provided everyone, the proposal that was submitted by Red Barn Engineering was not submitted by Red Barn Engineering. It is a joint proposal that is submitted by Matthew D. Wright, engineer, and I have no qualms. He is listed on the Army Corps of Engineers website as a coastal engineer. I understand, he is an engineer. But also, on this letter of interest is the signature of Charles Shabika. I then went through this proposal, and more than 3/4 of the references of what had been done were Shabika references. And that's, I recognize Charlie Shabika is an awesome PhD geologist who's done wonderful things. There's no question about that. But the intent was to find a firm who would come in and do a neutral and independent evaluation of Mr. Shabika, well, Shabika and Associates design, because the design was the creation, if I understand correctly, between the Lakota group working with Shabika. So I am really hard pressed how we can have a joint venture between Mr. Wright, Red Barn, and Shabika, and ask Mr. Wright to independently vet Mr. Shabika's work when they are working collaboratively. I also was somewhat surprised as I read this proposal, because I want to quote something. This is in the company profile of Shabika and Associates. Quote, "Working with Red Barn only strengthens Shabika and Associates' ability to work with the Winnetka Park District as well as the community, who, despite our successful track record, has one board member who has tried to rally the community and feels that we are incapable of completing another shoreline restoration project in Winnetka." I was stunned to read something like this in a proposal. I view language like this as an effort to intimidate and harass a board member that will then be forced to have to vote for this contract or not. I guess concluding my comments, Shabika and Associates and Red Barn have been together, they were together at Lloyd. I presented in my memo the contract dated May 10th, 2019, where this is for Lloyd, and it's construction work on Lloyd, where again, Red Barn is designated as the civil engineer to provide project engineering and project permit drawings. In conclusion, my point is that I do not doubt that Matthew Wright is an excellent engineer. I have no qualms at all. But how are we going to get a neutral, independent evaluation of this when Mr. Wright and Shabika are co-venturers? We're looking at over $12 million on this project. I would think that it would be worth our while to find a firm that is not affiliated with Shabika and Associates, simply to go back and give us input, look at it, there are fresh ideas. To do hydrodynamic modeling. When I asked Mr. Wright on Saturday, do you do this work? He said, no. I said, who would do that? Well, Shabika and Associates. Well, again, I'm very anal as a lawyer, but to me, that sort of study is not done by a PhD geologist. It's done by a licensed engineer, and in visiting with both Baird and also GZA, I understand that they have complex computer modeling that they use. And why this is important to me is because it helps us to understand what we really need as to how much rock we have to put in the lake, how high it has to be, how wide it has to be. Costa, you know far more about this than I do. But in the end, I'm sorry. I think we have not met the spirit of what that motion was. And I'm delighted that Mr. Wright is joining Shabika, but we still do not have an independent evaluation of Mr. Shabika, but Shabika and Associates design. And so I'm very disappointed. I think that you have not, as staff, met the spirit of what was intended by this motion. And so I'm going to make a recommendation that we discuss going forward again with an RFQ to try to bring in, let me finish here.
Please do.
Okay. The other concern I have is that in Illinois, and Council, Mr. Adams, you're well versed on this, there is the Professional Services Selection Act, if I have that correct, it is limited to 3 license categories: engineers, surveyors, and architects. Shabika and Associates, to my knowledge, and you can correct me, are not any of these 3 license categories. So my concern is, we have not had a contract with Shabika and Associates for a number of years. The Professional Services Act gives us discretion to bring in these licensed professionals and to have evergreen contracts with them. I don't think it provides the same latitude for a geologist or a coastal consultant that it doesn't fit one of these license categories. And so my question, and what I'm asking council for, is I want a written opinion of council that we are not violating any competitive bidding process under Illinois law that we should be doing. This is
I can tell you right now that we're not.
well, I want a written opinion.
I'm happy to do that. Let me just explain one thing. So there's the Professional Services Selection Act, and you actually laid it out perfectly. There's the 3 categories of professionals that are regulated and selected through that qualifications-based selection process. The only other statute in Illinois that would regulate the Park District's selection of any sort of professional, the only thing that comes close to that is the Section 8-1 of the Park District Code, which says that all contracts involving an expenditure in excess of $25,000 must be competitively bid. However, there's a large exception for professional services in that statute. So there is no real requirement that a professional of this type that's not an architect, engineer, or surveyor be selected through a competitive process. That's just the nature of the law right now.
And you'll put that in writing
Sure
for
will.
us?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I want to take an opportunity to expand a little bit and provide some more information. Each of the 3 consultants that responded to this RFP, GZA, Baird, and Red Barn, all contacted Shabika Associates to be a sub-consultant. All 3 of them recognized that Shabika Associates is the preeminent expert in this stretch of lakefront in Lake Michigan. No one has more experience than Charlie Shabika and Shabika Associates performing work in this area. So each of them, recognizing the history of this stretch of lakefront, sought to join forces with Shabika independently. So it should not be unusual that Matt Wright, Red Barn Engineering, who had a pre-existing relationship with Shabika and Associates and have collaborated on dozens of projects, it should not be a surprise that those 2 submitted jointly. It was much to my surprise, and as you and I have discussed, I kept a distance from this. I didn't look at any of the proposals. I left it entirely to staff. And then you and I've been away on business Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but had the occasion to read your memo last night and then reach out today, and I think there was a very constructive suggestion. The storm sewer that is so much in question on this particular motion is owned by the Village of Winnetka. When we designed the storm sewer relocation, we engaged Thomas Burke of Seabell to do so on our behalf. Those plans were then submitted to the village for their review. They actually had the authority to grant approval, but they deferred to their engineering consultant, Strand and Associates. So there were multiple professional engineers looking at the design that was originally submitted, drafted by, actually it was started with Spaceco Engineering, then went to Seabell for their specialty expertise, submitted to the village, reviewed by their professional engineering staff, and then to their outside consultant, Strand. To the extent that we have a team that was properly identified and gone through the selections process, I have no qualms about the selection of Shabika and Red Barn, led by Red Barn, the professional engineer. But I would suggest we could speak to the village, who I understand is also seeking, is they reached out to us and said, who'd you interview? Who do you know that could be an independent engineer? That would be a great opportunity to engage the village, have them engage a third-party coastal engineer so that they could do the same thing they did initially, but add in a coastal engineer. I think that, hopefully, having two minds look at it would be better than one. That's point one. Point two, with respect to modeling. Hydrodynamic modeling, sand movement, yes, these types of studies can be done. I look forward to receiving proposals, because I think you will find it would be wildly expensive to run these models. But we need to find out. We'll find out how many different models. Being an engineer by education, 35 years in the development business, I work with architects, engineers, planners, and a variety of experts day in and day out. I'm accustomed to the give and take, push and pull. I think what this board will find is that there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs between the height and the width and the length of the stone, the width of the opening, the distance offshore, and how much exposure we will have. If you're building a marina that needs to be open for commercial activity, it would not be unusual to have stone heights up into the 590s. In this instance, we are prioritizing, and the board has already talked about this, prioritizing views so that we can keep the groins lower than, certainly lower than Lloyd, and approximately at the height of the existing pier at Elder. Those are some of the exhibits. I encourage you to look at that documentation online. But what the advice that we're going to get from the coastal engineers, if you do it this way, expect this degree of protection. But there are going to be storms that are going to come and wash out the beach. And you're going to have to replenish the sand. We could do no protection, and then we know we get a wash out the sand. That's why I was encouraging you to go back and read the Shabika, or watch the Shabika proposal that addresses lake bed down cutting. This is a phenomena that occurs, and we heard from the IDNR during the village presentation. If Lake Michigan was untouched over the last 10,000 years, the shoreline could be as far as a mile further west. 85% of the Lake Michigan shoreline in Illinois is already improved and protected. And the 9 miles that isn't is north of Waukegan Harbor. I reiterate, we live in a sand-starved environment because of Waukegan Harbor and because of the Great Lakes Naval Training Center that project out as much as 2,000 feet into the lake, pushing all that littoral drift sand into deeper water. So maybe 6% of it makes it back to shore. This is the reason why everybody south has had to fortify their beaches. We benefit because we've had steel groins extending out 150, 200 feet, 215 feet for the past, since the 1950s. So part of that sand profile at Elder is because of the improvements that we have. They are dilapidated. The pier was built in the 1940s. That's absolutely beyond its useful life and falling apart. These are the decisions that we need to make as a board, being well informed by consultants. There are trade-offs, and we believe that we've made the proper choice with the experts. We'd love to have a second opinion, employed by the village, paid for by the village, even better. And let's proceed with making further progress.
2 points. One, do I understand then that this board is willing to have a collaborative process with the village? Should they engage a coastal engineer to have the village's consultant do an independent evaluation of design? Is that what I'm hearing?
Not of the design. The province of the design belongs with this board. We are responsible for the programming uses of the beachfront property. With respect to how those designs will perform, that is the question for the coastal engineer. You know, we are guided by the Lakefront Master Plan. We passed a motion reaffirming the use of the Headland Beach System. The purpose of the Headland Beach System is to protect the lakefront and provide recreational opportunities. I recognize that there are others that would like to take a different approach, but that was not supported by this board. It's been voted on in 2016, after the Lakefront Master Plan. It was reaffirmed on October 27, 2022.
I don't think anyone, I'm certainly not questioning the installation of a headland system. What I'm questioning is the devil's in the detail. There are all sorts of variations of that. This is a very expensive project for as we know, for this park district, very expensive. I would think we would want to have oversight at every step of the way. And I'm very concerned that Shabika felt the need to write what they did. I presume they were talking about me. My sense on that was if they could not understand that I was asking for an independent review, a peer review, they could not understand that. This is very disconcerting. I'm also concerned that Red Barn had a very unfair advantage because Red Barn came in with a joint proposal by our existing consultant. I've said my piece here. Hopefully, we're going to have a legal opinion from Park Council on paper we can put in the file that we have not violated any bidding process. And again, staff, a lot of money.
I just want to say one. No, I just wanted to say one thing. Clearly, there's a paucity of professionals in this field, and only 3 came forward to bid. One additional one picked up the packet and then did not use the bid. I think it's very regrettable, the comment that appeared in there. Perhaps they're anticipating or trying to document some opposition that they're aware of, and they know they need to perform at an extra high level of,
I view it as an intimidation of the commissioner. That's how I view it.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure I would take that tack. They're probably just acknowledging the situation that's, you made this a good cause. You made a good set of statements around this cause. But my concern is we don't seem to have a population of experts in this field that's sufficient. Perhaps the village, as an independent body, can also secure an independent coastal engineer, and those 2 pieces will help us get the review of the function that we like. In order to get the function, you have to pin some components of the design, because as Charlie Shabika said and as Soren Hall said, you tell me what you want to protect, you tell me how much sand you want to hold, you tell me what materials you're going to use, and I can tell you what level of protection you can get. But you have to start pinning some pieces of the equation, otherwise it's just, they could run 4,000. So, I don't think there's enough people. We could chase down Hay and say, listen, we really need to do an independent, but clearly they weren't interested in participating. So maybe the village, having the village work on that piece, they'll be able to pull more experts.
I certainly like intergovernmental cooperation. I think, we need to do that. I'm all for it.
Vicki?
So 3 things. One, can we ask board members to at least raise their hands so other people have the opportunity to speak and not listen to filibusters? So that's number 1. Number 2, to address the peer review. That came about because a board member had concerns about Charlie Shabika and his son and their credentials. So my suggestion was, we were very concerned about it, and I was not, let them complete their engineering, let them complete their design, and then hire another firm to do a peer review of their engineering. That was the intent of my statement. That's what I thought we agreed to, if that was going to be a concern of everybody, is that, and that's really the way the process should go. If you are interested in getting a peer review, they have to have something to review. So you're not hiring to be co-engineers. You're hiring them to review someone else's work and have any comments, whatever, that's what their job would be. Which again, another cost, if we're worried about cost. Third thing, it's upsetting to me that for, an hour ago, we were praising Coaster for all the work we did, all the work he did for having Saturday session, and someone just decided to throw feces all over what he just did in terms of the RFP for this thing. It's disgusting. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. You don't No, you just, fine, you could disagree. This man busted his chops, independent reviews, independent interviews, scored the thing with 3 competing firms that everyone said were pre-qualified to bid this thing. And now someone's gonna criticize of how that was done? Those are my comments, thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. Any other board members? Eric?
Just quick statement, I think the motion for the peer review was really good back in the summer, so that was great. I think the staff did a great job of assembling and then interviewing those 3 responders to the RFQ. You know, from my point of view, they selected a sole proprietor. And as a sole proprietor, Commissioner Root, you were a sole proprietor as an attorney, correct, in Texas?
Absolutely, I was.
Yeah, so at times you have to depend on outside experts to help you perhaps attack a case or complete a project. And I see that as no different with Red Barn partnering with Shabika. Mr. Wright, who I do not know and have not had the chance to meet, I would expect him as a civil engineer in good standing in the state of Illinois to have the utmost confidence and an appropriate level of oversight into this work and uphold his professional obligation. I think the process was, from my perspective, while not involved, but yet reported on, I thought it was well run. And sometimes we don't like the answers that come out of that, and that's okay. But it was a good process, and I think that work should be commended, so thanks.
I'd like to support Costa's effort. We ran the RFQ and asked for board input on the RFQ itself, asked for board input on the questions asked of the participating firms, and then went through an independent process of assessing 3 firms. So I think how you captured it, Mickey or Eric, is exactly how it played out. So I applaud Costa for how he ran the entire effort.
I just want everyone to know, Costa Katulis is one of the hardest working guys you'll know in all fields. And he is committed 20+ years to this Winnetka Park District. And I think his integrity is unimpeachable. And I think it's unfortunate. He didn't write the response. He was not the only person to evaluate the response. Each of us board members had the opportunity to comment on the RFQ, and that's as far as our participation went. Then it was up to staff. He ran a fair and open process. For us to reverse course opens the Park District to further scrutiny from the clear winner. Remember those point totals, 88, 83, 82. It wasn't close. There was a clear preference for Matt Wright and Red Barn based upon his qualifications and his interview. So,
Am I correct that all 3 applicants partnered with Shabika in their presentation?
all 3 inquired of Shabika if Shabika would be willing to be a sub-consultant given their extensive knowledge of this stretch and their experience working in Lake Michigan. Cynthia?
I had sent an email about some of the contracting questions. I guess my hope is that with this vendor that we do get a few different ideas to consider, because I think, depending on how things play out, we may not have the central T. Is all the sand gonna wash out if we just have the other ends? Is there enough flexibility to consider the, separate islands or submerged reefs? Do these firms have the capability for those kinds of questions? Because I think that those are the submerged reefs. A lot of good press recently from the IDNR for Illinois State Beach. They have poured millions into the type of modeling that we need with their consultants. There are partner nonprofits that have done this. I hope that the experts that we're going down a path with are able to tap into some of that broader expertise that is out there, that was not available at the time that they deployed, that was not available at the time that we did the Lakefront Master Plan. Because I think that things have come, the progress has been made on the engineering front that we are hopeful to see in our project.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly, I agree entirely with you. But we have decided on October 27th regarding the north end That's driven by relocating the stormwater discharge further north, further out, away from the swimming. We know where the south end's gonna be, essentially because of the improvements that are being proposed by Mr. Ishby at 205 Jared. What happens in between? That is the subject of, we're trying to narrow the focus and build consensus. How much lineal beachfront should we allocate to the dog beach? What should the separation between dogs and swimming, or dogs and our neighbor be? Those are the types of questions, and that's where having these experts, they can advise us on what the implications of certain designs are.
The other big question, and I put this out before, and I will put it out again, is working backwards from our budget, what is the best that we can do? Because
Totally.
there is a bit of a gap, right? And so I think that looking at it from what's our optimal design, but also here's our cost constraint, what's the best that we can do with our cost parameter is a good
Yep.
exercise as well to understand
And to
what our options are.
And to refresh everyone's recollection, the construction sequence by necessity would be north first, because that's the way down, that established protection, and that also accomplishes the relocation of the storm sewer. Then to the far south end and everything in between. But we don't know we don't have any answers on the in-between yet, but at least we know north and south, and we can work through sequencing, cost, phased implementation, all of those elements as we begin to narrow the focus.
So just to confirm your statement, the use of the term coastal engineer is something that's not recognized in the state of Illinois. Is that
With a license, correct.
okay? So we have heard about coastal engineers for months in this room and others. Can we stop using, is it appropriate to stop using the word coastal engineer? If there is a one?
No.
That's just a question, I don't know.
You get a PE after your name, right?
Okay.
You get an MD after your name. You're not gonna go see a podiatrist if you've got a heart attack, you know? You could have a PE after your name, you could have a subspecialty in stormwater management, or you could be a structural engineer, a PE and an SE. So it's really the subspecialty. I think that's what, that's really, look at the person's body of work. Where have they spent their time in their career, where is their knowledge? And that is what comes out of looking at a person's CV, work history, and their responses to the interview questions.
So they would be technically a civil engineer with a specialty in coastal engineering.
Yes.
Thank you, very helpful.
May I have a closing comment to my quote-unquote filibuster? Costa, please understand that this is not an attack on you. It is not intended to be. In looking at these proposals, the only engineer that came in a joint venture proposal is Red Barn. Baird submitted their proposal separately. GZA submitted their proposal separately. And I would never quote-unquote pour feces on any of you, because I admire every member of the park staff. You work very hard and you're most appreciated. At the same time, I want to make sure that we are strictly adherent to all bidding practices. There's a lot of money in this, a whole lot of money. And again, it will be an adventure working with the village, should they engage a coastal engineer. I've been told by coastal engineers that all coastal engineers are civil engineers, but not all civil engineers are coastal engineers, because of various, like NOAA affiliations, and apparently there's some other association that they participate in. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. Thank you very much. And then Commissioner Archibald, I have never ever disparaged Shabika and Associates, not ever. My question was to have an independent evaluation of work that they have done, and just for the good of the community. That was my focus, and it remains my focus. I have never, ever disparaged an earth scientist. I'm married to one, have been for 42 years, have great respect for them.
on to 8.3, update on Centennial Dog Beach temporary fence installation.
Thank you. So on December 1st, we had a discussion regarding the permanent structure for Elder Centennial, during which we referenced the Cook County ordinance, Cook County Animal and Rabies Control Ordinance, which calls for a dog park to be an enclosed area of land where dogs are permitted to be off leash, and that they must be on leash before entering the dog park, which is where there's an enclosed area. We also cited the Paderma Dog Access to Park and Recreation Areas Guide, and that calls for a fencing of the exercise area, and the dogs must remain leashed until inside the facility. So on January 12th, we then came forward recognizing we've been out of compliance with Cook County, and we have a risk management agency telling us to put up essentially boundaries or fencing. We approached the board on January 12th and outlined our temporary fencing plan in that board meeting with details around that temporary fencing plan, to which we had no board member push back on what we were proposing to do. So we then advanced that installation of the temporary fencing on January 17th. And then shortly thereafter, I had conversations with the village, I think the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the IDNR, and based on those discussions, have since removed the temporary fencing. But it presents a challenge for the board. We are out of compliance with Cook County. We have a risk issue, a no risk issue. So, you know, we have some options, I would believe, either to make sure that dogs are on leash at Centennial, or take some other steps if we need to. But I'd love to have board input on where we've taken this, what you'd all like us to do next.
So I want to,
May I ask a question? Have we had any sort of communication from Cook County? Have we been cited? Have they, you know, have we had any representative, official representative, reach out, send us a demand letter?
No, but we did bring it up on, in December, and we need to be in compliance. We were in compliance at some point where we had fencing primarily on the south border of 261, if memory serves me correctly, and then it was washed away some 7 or 8 years ago. So we've not had any communication specifically with Cook County, but we as a board have cited that we are out of compliance with their standards.
Let me ask one other question. Have we had a neighbor who has requested or demanded that we install this fence in return for perhaps an easement or a license?
No demand of that kind, no demand for any easement. We'd have to have an easement to go over 261 to put our temporary fencing in place for sure, because it's the property of the owner, Orchard 2020 Revocable Trust.
And have we secured that?
Yes, we
been
have.
in discussions?
We don't need
let
a
me
discussion.
let me stand in here. This is not an inquiry. We are explaining what transpired. We've recognized for quite some time that we're not in compliance with Cook County regulations. We discussed it with our risk management people. They confirmed this is not acceptable. So we had the benefit for many, many years of having 3 vacant homes. 261 was vacant, and the 2 homes south of Sheridan were vacant. We had impassable conditions in either direction. We had a fence. The best of my knowledge, there wasn't a permit required for the original construction. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, there's the fence, there's a chain link fence that ran defining the northerly boundary of the dog beach. Those poles were removed just this week when we pulled out the other poles because they were hazards. Katie, you're shaking your head. It's the God's honest truth. There was a fence that separated the dog beach. You could see it. Go on the aerial photographs. Look at historical photographs. There was a fence there. 2009. Okay? Now, at the south end, there are impassable conditions south of 203 Sheridan. They're still impassable conditions, but we're out of compliance. This board has a choice. We can close the dog beach entirely, or we can keep the dog beach open and make it an on-leash park until such time as we can come into conformance. We cannot knowingly, willingly operate an off-leash park in violation of Cook County ordinance, we lose any liability protection and we expose the park district to those claims. So, look, many people, I'm among them, that have let my dog off leash before. I assume that risk when I do so as an individual. But you can't, as a park district, permit it knowingly to occur. So my recommendation is that we make it available. We don't want to close the park. Let's make it available, but you have to be on leash, and let's move quickly to arrive at a design, such as some of those that were presented during the workshop, where we can accomplish both objectives. The first one is to create a secure enclosure, keeping the Cook County regulations, and the second one is to provide a bypass so people that do want to traverse the beach can traverse the beach.
I think the idea of a leash park is better than closing for sure. It's gonna be a change, I'm sure it will be difficult, but I think that's the safest way to go, and the path that provides some access for people to use it as they sort of have. And then I'm hopeful we can get a permit for a fence that encloses it, and we have a series of designs where there's a passageway that goes across the landward side that allows access. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with some iteration of those three pieces: leash, passageway, and fence correctly permitted. Which we haven't had to do before, but fine, we have to do it now, that's fine.
Just a question, has Paderma sent us a letter expressing that, you know, they would not cover, would not insure us unless we immediately install this fence? The Paderma guidelines are much more lenient than the Cook County Animal Control Ordinance. And their guidelines give discretion and to the park. Nikki, Commissioner Archibald and I, we saw these guidelines when we were working with the Dog Beach Advisory Group. I'm just kind of astonished that all of a sudden, you know, we feel this heightened need for strict security of our dogs.
We raised it January 12th, no board member had an issue with it.
I just want to go back to that. We raised it as here are the guidelines. We did not raise it as we are going out next week and putting something in the lake with no communication.
Oh, no, I went back and looked at it. I went back and looked at that meeting because I know that we talked about it in 2020 when we looked at other locations for dog parks. And I know that the Cook County ordinance was discussed. I know that we talked about it in the summer of 2021 when we had the big long conversation about the dog park, the potential other locations of dog parks, and then the dog beach people came. And I know we had another conversation about it then. I pay attention to it because that dog fence would be useful to me. It would make that dog beach useful, but my dog will not stay on the beach. And then I know that we discussed it in October. I know that we discussed it in December 1st, and I just reviewed today, the January 12th. And the conversation, it was in this room, and Costa was talking about the fence. The December 1st was at Hubbard Woods, and we talked about the Cook County constraints. This January 12th meeting, we spoke right here, and Costa said, so Costa is going to go, and how much would it cost to construct a fence? $5,000 if we do it ourselves, $15,000 to $18,000 if somebody else does it. Is this ringing a bell? And
Is
then
there any
also-
thought to a communication plan? Because I feel like that has been the botch.
Well,
Okay, like that has been, like, I was coming out of that meeting saying, okay, this is gonna happen next week, and how are we gonna communicate with our dog beach advisory group, and how are we going to communicate with our users, and I feel like, it felt a little bit like a poke in the eye to a group that we are trying to work with and engage with and have on board with our beach plans, and I did not have the sense that that was, at that meeting, that we were to the point where we needed to have that,
And this
but
is-
we needed to have it, because
Yeah.
well, and we
this
have not received, demand letters.
Right.
Evanston is like, we're gonna operate our dog beach, and Hope Cook County looks the other way. They
Yeah.
have looked the other way for 20-some years.
Yeah.
So, I am questioning, like,
It is
where is the
clear.
urgency?
It is clear, well, it is clear that we come out of these meetings, and unless there's a specific motion and a specific vote, it's very hard to.
A presentation of a plan by staff
True.
on how to
I
manage this would
agree.
have gone a long way.
I agree.
For the
Number one.
community and for the
Yeah.
board.
Fair enough, it's number
We-
one.
yeah.
But number two is, we're missing some key people who make that happen in our agency, and so temporarily, we're trying to fill as many gaps as we can, as quickly as we can. So I would say, I went back and looked at that again, because I thought, I just wanted to be able to speak from a position of certainty.
I will be delighted to go watch it again.
Yes, I
For
can
my
tell
viewing
you,
pleasure.
for anyone who wants to know,
Remember, we talked about the double gate system.
Yeah.
Each
No,
side.
I remember talking about these
Okay.
things, I just did not have the
It's
sense
just a
that
big-
next week
yeah.
it is going up.
yeah, so for anyone who wants to know, it's hour 3 of the January 12th, minute 24 through minute 27 for the January 12th, and for the December 1st, it's minute 25 through 29. So you can go back and you can look at it, you can just slide your finger across the bottom of the video and take a look. But I did review it.
If I may, on the topic of the communication, the announcement of the addition of the temporary fence was placed on the website as soon as the work began. There was also a planned email and social media post that was stopped once the cease order came through. So the communication was prepared, it just
When was that?
circumstances changed.
There's a lot of history behind the fences. There are fences on beaches, Chicago, Evanston, Kenilworth, Glencoe, Wilmette, Lake Bluff, there's fences on beaches. And when we inquired a long time ago with the IDNR, they were not interested in permitting fences. Now, and they acknowledged that many of those fences were erected after the fact by the municipalities. In some instances, such as Kenilworth, there's a severe drop. Glencoe, same situation. That's a significant risk factor. Others were established for dog beaches, and others for security.
May I? One final comment? We have a member of the Dog Beach Advisory Committee here, sitting over there. And I want to apologize to that member and to all the other members that I really did not think this was an instantaneous construction action. Or I would have suggested with Commissioner Archibald that we pull the advisory committee together and talk to them, get their input, share the cost, and unfortunately that didn't happen. And these people spent a lot of time and effort last year in meetings. Secondly, I want to talk about Gilson Dog Beach in Wilmette. In the winter, Gilson goes out and they remove temporary panels. Commissioner Archibald and the Dog Beach Advisory Committee members, we all went down and we saw that. So they have an open dog beach off-season. They put the panels in during the season. I'm very curious as to how a community like Wilmette does not see that this is such a risk management issue. I'm really curious.
I'm happy to address that. I refer you again to the workshop, because there is a specific exhibit that has a picture, an aerial picture of Gilson Park and their dog beach relative to the proposed option. Do note the north arrow. The north arrow on that exhibit. Gilson's dog park faces southeast. There's a 485-foot stone groin that protects the northerly boundary. So the prevailing nor'easters that create the most damage, or the north wind, that dog beach is protected by that 485-foot long stone groin. There's another parallel groin at the south end. So any wave action that comes into Gilson typically is head-on. Gilson is 60 acres. It's 3,500 lineal feet of beach. The dog beach is at the very south end. There are no proximate residential neighbors. You have to go 3/4 of a mile to get to the first residential neighbor. So your dog is going to run a very long way before going onto private property. We have neighbors on both sides. We don't have that luxury. We have a neighbor with small children. on both sides, and there is
Not
concern.
yet.
But we can't ignore it. And there are small children that visit Elder, we can't ignore that. We have a swimming beach, and that's why I invite everyone to look at the plans, and we need to come with an answer as to what is an appropriate separation between a dog beach and a people beach. And for everyone's benefit, Adam is of counsel to the Park District as well.
There's some cynicism that I hear about the applicability of the Cook County Animal Control Ordinance. Because there's been some discretion exercised by the county not to strictly enforce it. That is not binding on the county. The county can change its mind any day to enforce the ordinance. The fact that they have chosen not to, intentionally or unintentionally, is not something that is reliable. You can't stop the county from enforcing their ordinance because they haven't for a long time. So, past precedent is not necessarily indicative of future performance. So, the fact that they've chosen not to enforce it does not mean it's not a valid, enforceable ordinance.
So, is there consensus among the board to properly notice and convert Centennial Beach to an unleash dog beach versus closing it until we're in conformance?
You have to sign it, and you have to put the notice up on the website and
Properly
signs up.
communicate?
Yeah, we'll do our best, and then, now it's all you.
We will do our best. The only piece that will slow down that if the board decides is our assistant marketing and brand manager is at the IPRA conference currently, will be there tomorrow. A good portion of our staff will be there, but we can work on it simultaneously.
If we can develop appropriate signage and get communication out, that would be well received.
Well, there's a second piece to that, so, you know, we got a stop work order from the village, so, you know, someone needs to be all over the village to be a partner with us and get this thing going. Because I don't think they object to closing the beach. You know, there was a clamor about this thing going up that people didn't know about it, so they thought maybe something was a little miss afoot. But here we are now, and, you know, so we need to go to the village, have them truly understand what our situation is, make sure that they agree with what we're doing, and I think they will, because I don't think they want us to not be in compliance with the regulation. And, you know, find out from them, what do we have to do to expedite them taking the stop work order off, getting us a permit so we can get going. And I think the IDNR won't have an issue with the same thing if we go to them. Like, we want to comply with Cook County guidelines, we want to protect people, we want to put up this fence. And finalizing on that, it wasn't like this fence, whether or not it was gonna be there wasn't a mystery. We talked about it when we had, you know, the Dog Beach Committee. There was no question that there was going to be a fence there. So, it shouldn't be a surprise. We should do it, and akin to our council, it's like, if Cook County hasn't been enforcing us, like saying, well, you know, I really speed down Willow Road and down Edens at 80 miles an hour, but I haven't been caught yet. Does that make it okay? No. So,
Thank you.
I think we have one more step we'd have to complete, correct? Coach, we'd have to go to the IDNR with an application for a permit.
The steps in order to make a dog beach temporary or not, in reality at Centennial Park, we require 3 permits. We require a permit with the Village of Winnetka that will also invoke a step to go through the design and review board, so that's step 1. Step 2, we would have to engage IDNR, we'd have to submit a permit through that. As part of that, there would be a 30-day open comment period for public notice for people to respond back to them, for them to then opine and come up with whether or not they would give a permit. And then thirdly, the Army Corps of Engineers as well would be, need to support this with a permit. They would not have to go out for public notice, but they would have to review it and find that it's in accordance with their specifications, and then go ahead and approve that. So there would be 3 steps, 2 of which would require lengthy time to accomplish. The 30-day public notice as well as design and review board.
Is there any distinction between temporary and permanent?
Yep.
Okay. keep moving.
Point of clarification. Right now, Centennial Dog Beach is restricted access through a key fob. The primary reason for that is, again, compliance with Cook County regulations, so that we can ensure that all dogs have proper vaccination. Should we keep that gate engaged? Got it.
Yep.
And I would add one more, given we want to be better at being transparent as we're going through the process, let's post updates. Hey, as of this date, we've gone to the village, as of this date, we've gone to IDNR. So people are aware where we are, what's next, so they have an expectation of completion.
Okay.
Everybody's looking at Kyle, who runs all of recreation. So,
Centennial Dog Beach
everyone's
comes
looking
around.
either,
Staring
yeah,
at the
everyone
camera.
looks at Kyle or Costa. Costa, all projects, and Jim, all money, and Kyle, all rec. So,
Everything.
So will there be a specific email to the pass holders outlining? Okay.
Yep, it will be amended from the original email about the fence, and that should be a quicker process. Getting signage out to the beach that is of the quality we expect will be slightly longer. I don't imagine it would be tomorrow, but I think we can get electronic communication going.
Great.
that helps.
All right. Move on to consideration of ordinance 595. Jim?
Ordinance 595 is a recommendation for the budgeting and appropriation of funds for the 2023 fiscal year. What we are looking for tonight from the board is a consensus for this ordinance that we will then make available to the public for a 30-day review period. Once the 30-day review period is over, we will hold a public hearing for any comments the public chooses to make before the board then votes on the ordinance. That's sort of where we are at this point this evening.
Okay, and the proposed schedule for doing so?
We plan to put the ordinance on the website tomorrow for a 30-day review. We will then hold a meeting on March 9th because the 30-day review period will exceed the regularly scheduled board meeting in February. So the committee of the whole meeting in early March will be converted to a full board meeting for public hearing and voting on the ordinance.
Can I ask a question of council? Can we hold a public hearing in a committee of the whole, or does it need to be a special board meeting?
I would make that meeting a special meeting,
Okay.
because you do need to vote
Okay.
on the budget at the end of the hearing. So,
And then go to a special event.
yeah, I
Can we
would
replace
do
the
the
committee,
hearing.
can we replace the committee of the whole meeting with the public, with the special meeting? Do we need to
You
do?
would cancel the committee of the whole meeting and just notice up a special meeting for the board. And then you would have, you know, the ability to take any action.
And we only have to produce one set of minutes?
That's correct. Well, actually two, one for the public hearing.
Yes. Okay. 2 versus 3. All right, I'll let you guys take it from there. Do we need a motion tonight to
No.
adopt this?
Nope.
Just consensus?
Consensus.
Everybody on board?
Yes.
Yes?
Thank you, Jim, for answering all my questions.
And,
No, but
hey,
let's be clear, let's all say
thank David
yes.
Seaman.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
thank Commissioner Seaman in absentia,
Yes.
who put a ton of time working with Jim to get this right.
Absolutely. I could not have gotten to this point without his input and his insight and his time and effort. So he definitely deserves some recognition for
And I
that.
think that's why he went on vacation.
You had 4 meetings with him. I think it was incredibly detailed in the discussion, so.
Surprised
Thank you.
Jim is now on vacation also.
All right,
Sunday, we'll see.
we'll get that posted, and we'll move on to proposed media policy for the Winnetka Park District.
Yep, so you have the proposed media policy. It's the intent of moving this forward to our next board meeting in which we can have a vote. So it's not a vote tonight, but consideration for it would be in the February 23rd board meeting to ensure that it's considered a policy within the Winnetka Policy Manual, Park District Policy Manual. So just wanted to ask commissioners if you have any questions or comments regarding the proposed language to let you know. We'll bring it forward in the next committee of the whole meeting, first meeting in February, and then subject to everybody being on board.
So we first posted this at the last meeting. We discussed it at length. And we invited commissioners to offer any edits to the proposed policy. Anybody have any edits?
I am sorry, I don't mean to talk so much this evening, but we've hit topics where I've had involvement. The media policy has subpart 3, and it says that any employee or commissioner that is approached by members of the media is instructed to state that he or she cannot comment, but will refer the questioner to the executive director. And then it goes on to say, under no circumstance is an employee or commissioner to release or discuss information related to Park District business. I called Jason Anselman, who is with IAPD, and I said, Jason, I know that you give awards for policy manuals to various park districts. And he said, yes, that is true, IAPD does. So he sent me the Oak Park media policy, and he sent me the Glenview media policy, and it's interesting, because they're almost verbatim. And I'm going to give these
To this one?
Thank you.
Pardon?
To this, to ours.
Pardon? No,
Yes.
they're verbatim
To
as
each other.
far as
To each other, got
other.
it, got it.
And what is very interesting is they do not put a gag order on any commissioner. They let commissioners speak freely and openly, which I rather thought was our duty. But what they have is a sentence that says, if a board member speaks for himself or herself, then that board member first should be fully informed about the matter at hand and should clearly state that his or her comments are being made as a private resident and not as a representative of the district. Even then, a board member should remember that comments made as a private resident are likely to be attributed to the district. My point is to suggest that perhaps we could take out this prohibition, thou shalt not speak, section 3, and consider adding the language that I just read. And,
I'm gonna invite Adam Simon to speak, because he was the one that actually brought this to our attention and helped draft this. And I thought his comments were very useful when he was helping to draft it, and it was a sort of a way of looking at it that I hadn't thought of before.
So,
Can I just ask who is,
Adam Simon is from Ansel Glade. He is also of council to the Park District. He
Got
was introduced a little bit earlier.
thank you, sorry.
It's okay, no, it's okay.
so, first, the specific language is obviously different. The spirit is identical, in my opinion. The spirit of both policies is the same, and that's the following. The board only acts as a group. Each individual, each commissioner individually is no more than a resident of the Park District, and so the board acts through its motions and its ordinances and its resolutions, and through official media releases. So whether it's written in the fashion described in the policy that was presented to you, or in more genteel language in the policy you read, the spirit is identical. And the point of this is to remind everyone that when they speak on issues related to park business, they have to be very conscious about whether or not they're expressing themselves as an individual or as a representative of the Park District. And no matter how you say it, that's true. So you can skin the cat a dozen different ways, the point remains the same.
I think the summary for what I found was particularly interesting, that as an individual commissioner, we are simply a resident. We act, prioritize, and direct staff only twice a month in this room.
I think we all recognize that.
Okay.
So I, at the last meeting that we first brought this up, invited additional feedback and input. I'd love to see that circulated so that we can come back at the next committee of the whole meeting and try and hash out consensus around the policy, it'd be great.
Then why don't I scan these and email them to everyone and Mr.
Well, let's do it in keeping with the Open Meetings Act, hand it to staff, and
Of
staff do it.
course. I'm happy to
Yeah,
have staff do
thank
it,
you.
or I'll do it individually. Mr. President, I'm very aware of the Open Meetings Act, very aware. But in addressing Mr. Simon, I always prefer to have broader opportunities to read language than to have very restrictive opportunities that say thou shalt not. And so the spirit may be the same, the language could be interpreted otherwise.
So if you'd like to,
Sure.
I'd be happy to scan it this
No,
evening and get it out to the commissioners tonight. So thank you for getting that.
All right, we'll take that up at the next committee of the whole meeting. And moving on to new business. No new business. Matters the director.
Would first like to recognize Taylor Brooks, who is a new rotational employee for the Winnetka Park District. If you'd like to stand up, Taylor, she joined us what probably feels like years ago. But what's great about Taylor, she has an undergraduate degree from Loras, a graduate degree in recreation from Western Illinois, and the role in which she is working with the Park District is a bit of a rotational program, 20% in finance, 20% in HR, 20% in marketing, administration, and then recreation. That'll last for anywhere between 1 year and 2 years, but in that period of time, she will then pick a swim lane to be dedicated to one of those disciplines. So it's a model that we're going to continue so that we keep growing our own, if you will. And she's been fantastic in aggregating information around the platform tennis development and all the paperwork that went into that, now Library Park, with some of the work Adam and Jude provided. So more about the learnings of Park District from the 5 different disciplines. So thank you. Thanks for being part of the team. We also received, and I distributed this to the commissioners, there was a second electronic communication, I believe, from one of our residents regarding meeting materials and written minutes. Teresa Lynn, who's the supervising attorney for the Public Access Bureau, responded to that letter indicating that the matter is now fully closed. There's no further action warranted by the Park District, and they're closing their files. So I'm happy to provide a written copy to anybody, but I think you each received it electronically. The Elder Centennial invoices, just to give you an update on legal expenses in total, as well as specifically for the Elder Centennial parcel. So legal expenses for 2022 total, bear with me here, $139,214.57. There were invoices in 2022 that were related to 2021 services that totaled $25,249.50. I've yet to create the 2023 spreadsheet, but we did receive one invoice in 2023 that dates back to 2022 for $8,181. So I'll do the work to create that third spreadsheet, but in total it's $172,645.66 for all of our legal expenses. I did, just as a quick heads up, if you review our vouchers, I don't think, Jim, the $6,000 voucher is in, or bill for Cat Muchin is in this voucher?
No, it's not. It will be the next one.
Okay, so I'll advance, warning, there's a $6,000 bill that goes back to 2020 that had yet to be paid, and it is relating to environmental assessments for the stormwater project, where the Park District turned outside counsel accordingly. So you'll see that noted in the vouchers. I think Commissioner Rapp, you'll see that, but we're happy to provide the detail. It started out as a $23,000 invoice, and I was happy to work with Steve Adams to get that reduced, and you were great in helping us get that down to $6,000. I also need to thank you, I skipped over this for your your guidance back to the OMA steps. You called it before this whole thing unfolded, both for the first letter and for the second letter, and your counsel was great, so thank you for that, and for your guidance, and just talking with me as it unfolded. I know the letters all went to you, but I think we're on the right track, so thank you for that, Steve. As far as Elder Centennial expenses specific to the project, total for 2022 is $259,164.80. Grand total from 2019 to 2022, $651,712.05. So that's where we are in those invoices.
That includes it.
Yeah.
Including it. Okay.
Happy to share the details as anybody would like them. That's it.
All right. Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Yep.
Not a question, but just a little context for the vouchers. In order to have them posted in time for people to review them, they are generally done a week prior to the meeting. So the vouchers that were approved tonight were through January 19th, right? And so we're always gonna be a week behind the board meeting when the vouchers are being reviewed and approved. So, which is why that one did not show up on this particular list. There's just that lag period. I just wanted everybody to be aware of that.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Just regarding the recent communication from Teresa Lim, clearly, like, it's good to have clarity around the agenda packets, that they can be updated at any time. I'd just like to get a view on, is that expected to be a practice? Because I know we did significant updates to the June 9th packet. I know that in the communication we had from Libby, it sounded like there was an intention to update a few more. Have any others been updated?
Not to my knowledge, no. I
Okay.
think the process that we put in place, and I'm grateful for the board's support to try and get all meeting content, or all content to support the agenda in advance of the meeting, and we've tried to do that on the Friday before a meeting. It doesn't always work perfectly, but I think that has worked out well. The June 9th one, respectful of that particular meeting, we retroactively added, but I don't see that happening
Okay.
on a go-forward basis. If it does, I'll be sure to let the board know.
Okay, no, I just think it's also important for the public to know, like, it's difficult when things are moving and you have some expectation that you will be able to go back to the website, refer back to information and not have it changed retroactively without any knowledge. So I just want to make sure that it is not the intention to continue to go back and change these packets, and that it's, the packet is obviously, if, we go
Most
back
of
to
them
the
are
file.
additions, right? Most of the packet changes are additions of information that's being added retroactively.
June 9th is a special condition.
Yeah.
No,
It was
I get,
voluminous information
Yeah.
that was added at the request of the board.
But most of it is additive, right?
So if I could jump in here real quick, we did have instances where presentations were being finalized, hours before the actual board meeting, which then led to this overall process to try and get presentations done,
okay.
the Friday before. So the staff has reacted in a manner that has been guided by the board and will continue to do so. So
I just want to make sure that we can assure the public that when they look at a packet and then, like even this dog beach stuff, that you have some assurance that when you go back, you will be able to find the staff memo that related to the topic. The proposal, the contract, the communication, whatever it is, that you can go back and find that again. The presentation, that it is the presentation that was delivered,
Thank you. All right, nothing else? No. All right, we'll move on to remarks from, did you have any remarks?
I just had a question. Somehow I heard that we have a new license agreement and I believe I heard this from you today, Warren, where you indicated that we have a license agreement to use the beach and grounds of 261 Sheridan with respect to future construction. I presume that also related to
the temporary easement, which
Temporary license.
Temporary
to
license.
cross
Yeah,
the beach,
correct.
so we could perform the work. That
And
was
do
in-
we have that in writing?
Yep, it will expire tomorrow. So we we had to move materials down to Elder, across to Centennial. And the only way to do that is to get a temporary license.
So that's the fencing materials?
Right.
Why haven't they?
So we then removed the fencing material, back channeled it through Elder, and we're out.
And there were no conditions, nothing granted to the owner
No,
of
so I
61?
worked with, Steve was great, there's nothing.
As this is common practice, if you're crossing someone's property, you need a license or an easement. It's really basic mechanics. This is a staff matter, it's nothing unusual. Defer to council.
And we just, staff said, hey, it's wildly impractical to try to install the fence by accessing it only from Centennial because of the size of some of the equipment and the nature of the materials. So it made a lot of sense to access it from Elder. And so we got a very simple one-page license agreement, 1 or 2 page, and it expires tomorrow. So there's no other conditions in there.
Yeah, okay, so, Commissioner Reed, you'd asked a question regarding the donations that could be specific to, Park District receiving donations for Elder Centennial. And, part of my overall process from 2020 is to talk with residents and or others who might be interested in providing donations. Once the plug was pulled on Centennial, Elder Centennial, those verbal representations, there's no sales cycle for me to go back to any potential donor at this point in time. So we don't have anything in writing, never have had anything in writing. It's all my efforts to meet with residents and talk about what can we get in the way of a consideration for a project. Don't have anything in writing, and they would not ever want anything in writing until we actually have a project.
I think I forwarded you an email I received from a constituent, where they had been in discussions, I believe, with you. And they were asking questions about a sum of $5 million.
Yeah.
And so,
That's
no,
all
we're
go on.
just talking about the past process.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to clarify so people know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Remarks from visitors, this is the second opportunity to address the board on any issue. When called upon, come to the center position in front of the commissioners. Please state your name for the record and speak directly to the board. Keep all comments under 3 minutes. This is not a question and answer forum, so please do not expect a response or answer from the park board this evening. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use the comment cards, which are available near the sign-in sheets. And any park district staff will accept your card and be shared with the board. Would anyone like to speak at this time? Sherry?
I have a couple comments. One regarding the media policy. I think the least restrictive is what's most helpful to the community. I think it's important to know that not everybody's ideas are rubber stamped and that there are various opinions. That's why you are selected, not elected, but selected by the caucus and then put on these various boards. We get our information from various sources, whether it be the Trib, Dennis Brodkin and Cranes, the Patch, the Record. There are lots of different iterations of those stories. I think it's healthy to know that there are varying opinions, not one collective opinion. We know there's a collective opinion when something's been decided. So I just want to put that out there, and I hope you'll listen to the Oak Park or Park Ridge or whatever, read those carefully for that reason. Secondly, the fact that over $500,000 has already been spent and there's nothing to show for it. I've lived here 28 years, I've never seen such wastefulness. I think that is shameful. As I mentioned at the end of my comments before, you use ADA a lot as a selling point for the unification of the beach. By now, with the boardwalk at Tower that goes down to that center stone thing, something could have been built for a fraction of that $600,000 for ADA. You could have invested in those big wheel sand, I don't know what they're called, but wheelchair type things for ADA. I think it's a huge disappointment and shameful that that wasn't looked at before for when improvements were made at Lloyd and Tower. That's what I have to say. Thank you again. Unbelievable.
So Warren, you called me out on the fences. The fences were illegally put in at 261 on the north and the south side. They were both taken down. And the one at 203, we asked James Casey from the IDNR what happened with the fence on the south end of that property. And he said that was illegally done, not permitted, and should be removed at the homeowner's expense. So that's my response. The communication, Christina, you hit the nail on the head. There's been no communication. And you know what, we have been at this for 2.5 years, and we've asked you to tell us about the fence. You know, if you think we go and see a fence put up and that we're not wondering why the fence is put up in the middle of January, it looks fishy. I don't care if it is or isn't. We're trying to understand, we're guessing why the fence is being put up. And you guys need to do a much better job of communicating. The last thing is, I'm not sure why the dog beach is where it is, and I'm not sure why leashes aren't acceptable for the rest of our lives. So I don't understand why you have to have a fence on this property on the north and the south end. I have to say, I have never in my life, and I've gone to a lot of meetings at a lot of places, in this village for 40 years, I'm appalled at the behavior tonight of your board. I have to say, I cannot believe that someone that asked a question about a proposal that had their name not in it, but was cited, that you chose that proposal. It's unbelievable that you would pick a proposal that called out a commissioner. Secondly, for you to use the words you used to a woman at this meeting, I think you owe her an apology, and I'm going to speak for the public. I think it's beyond reproach. And I have to say, your board needs to have a closed session and talk about treating each other nicely. This was, my mother would be roll over in her grave. And it's your duty for us to be allowed to speak to you all. Simon, never met you. Use the Oak Park and the Glenview. We have the right to talk to them. It is our only communication, and it's our only way to know what's going on. And a gag order is not acceptable. And I just want to say, at what point will we end this? $750 to $1 million over, I know 2022, I don't know 2021, but is there an end to this? Are we just going to spend money every month for the rest of our life? It's 2.5 years you've had to make the deal. The deal hasn't been done. Stop the deal. Be done. No more legal expenses. No more drawings. We'll do what we have to do. But it is ad infinitum. And it's frustrating for the public. And if we don't get to talk to you all, I mean, it's going to really be ugly. I'm speaking from the heart.
Somebody else? Susan?
It's embarrassing. And my purse.
Susie Shriver, 152 Glenwood, Winnetka. I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to meet on Saturday the 21st. It was listed as a workshop, and I believe you indicated that at prior meetings, saying you would be holding a workshop / open house. And I think you did have an open house. I do not think you had a workshop. There was no defined time where people could gather by the nice round tables that you had set up and talk about dog beaches or revetments or, your 6 different stages. It would have been very much more helpful and behoove in the future to set aside a time or somehow gather people together, because a lot of people had 20 minutes or maybe half an hour to come, and some of us stayed the whole time, but it was just an observation. And I think the next thing we really have to address when we do these is put in costs. All I've heard for this past week is there were no costs. We don't know what they're talking about. So respectfully, if you could add costs and, breakdowns, it would be extremely helpful. Thank you very much.
2 people in a row. You guys decide.
animal control ordinance on the website?
It already is. It's been posted for a couple months.
Excellent, okay. Then let me call your attention to section 10.7, okay? Which, I'm not gonna read you because it's, long. I'm just gonna do 2 sentences. It gives us wiggle room. It does not say you gotta do these fences. It doesn't say that. It says municipalities have rights, okay? We can do other things. So, just the first 2 sentences of section 10.7, excuse me, my voice is gone. Powers of municipalities and other political subdivisions to regulate animals. That's the topic. Nothing in this chapter shall be held to limit the power of any municipality or other political subdivision to prohibit animals from running at large, nor shall anything in this chapter be construed to limit the power of any municipality or other political subdivision to further control and regulate animals, blah, blah, blah. We have wiggle room. We don't necessarily have to have fences. So please look over that little section. It's very short, but it will indicate to you that you don't have to have that fence. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Ralph, I'll keep it brief tonight. Thank you for all these great comments we've been coming out this evening. In a play off of the way this case you used, that workshop was unbelievable. I mean, hats out to everybody who put in, clearly a lot of hard work went into it, and I commend you for your time. But the unbelievable to me was that it lacked context. As was just mentioned, there were no numbers, there was no financing plan, no indication of what the repercussion would be on our real estate taxes. There was no staffing plan, and also there was no information regarding the environmental impact of this enormous project. Secondly, you mentioned how proud you were that you had specialists were there. I, on the other hand, was profoundly disappointed that there was no advanced science being advanced. You talked about your specialists. Chuck Dowding and Phil Enquist have asked some really important, thought-provoking questions, which were sorely ignored in all of the glorious panels. Third, I firmly believe that stickers on boards in a lovely open house are a substitute for a referendum. You need to get your hands around this project, thoroughly vet it, give the public full knowledge of everything, and let us vote. This is not your pet project. And lastly, I firmly believe that this represents something you want, but does not represent a community need. We are entering a recession. There are an infinite number of things that could be done in this village and in our larger community that would advance a lot more people. But there is redundancy. We have lots of other beaches. This is hardly the highest and greatest use of taxpayer dollars, in my personal opinion. Thank you.
Evening, I'm Jim Rao, I live on Photo Lane. Thank you for taking the time for tonight's meeting and for comments. The agenda packet for tonight's program has a set of slides reviewing the Park District's prior actions related to the dog beach. However, as far as I can tell, nothing in the presentation addressed the need for a permit from the village or from the IDNR. I know we've already covered some of this tonight, so I don't mean to be redundant. But it would be interesting to hear if the Park District Commissioners have thoughts on whether any of the dog beach options under consideration by the Park District meet the IDNR guidelines for the issuance of a permit for construction, or whether the Park District considers its work on Centennial Beach east of the toe of the bluff subject to the authority of the IDNR and subject to its permit approval, or whether the final dog beach proposal as adopted by the Park District Commissioners would be submitted to the IDNR for approval and the requisite 30-day notice and comment period. And another question is, and I don't mean to sound small in this, but I'm wondering how much money was spent on the fencing that went up and had to be removed last week. And another topic which has already been rather thoroughly discussed in the last few minutes, it has to do with this proposed policy that you will consider further with regard to comments by commissioners to the public. And I'm wondering if it's appropriate for elected officials of a government body to to be banned or muzzled from discussing public business. How are residents to know where the commissioner stands on issues of public import? Thank you very much, and I would just echo a couple of things Katie said. Commissioner James, in your comment to Commissioner Root, I don't think that in anything that she said was she impinging Costa's reputation at all. She was merely asking whether the assignment had been fulfilled. So I thought that was a rather sharp and inappropriate comment. Thanks very much.
One more?
Oh, again, I wasn't gonna say anything, but we are here. The policy manual, I'm glad you clarified that, and I do believe your comments about the spirit, but I think the only thing that is wrong with the wording is a little strong. So I'm hoping that that gets changed. Just soften the words, that's all. Sailing was brought up tonight, and it reminded me that I had brought it up one time. And in the new plan, I'm a little confused. Boards will be at Centennial, but not sailboats. I'm not gonna ask you a question, I'm just making a statement. I want to know if this is true or not. Will sailing continue to be at Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay, and boards both places? I mean, it's kind of a water situation, that's why I'm wondering about that. You don't have to answer me, but my suggestion would be to maybe have it both places, or for sure not take them away from Lloyd, because I think a lot of people that have boats, sailboats, it's all kind of one family. That's just a comment. The Dog Beach current rules, I do believe they have to be on a leash in the park. So if in this downtime, the proposal is going to be that they will be on a leash on the beach also. What about in the water? I don't think there's any rules about that. I guess they take them off the leash and let them swim around. I think that's something that has to be clarified. So I was just curious about that. I also think that somebody should be contacting the Cook County rules person, whoever that is, to see if it really applies to a dog beach. That beach is really quite enclosed, and it will be even more with the new plan. They talk about dog parks, they don't talk about dog beaches. I don't know, maybe that's a way that we're different here, because it really is somewhat enclosed. You got the big bluff behind you, you've got abutments on the beach, and now the groins go out there too. I haven't seen anything on parking that it apparently is not going to change in this plan, but I really haven't seen any update on parking. I've been wondering about that. And then I noticed that the gazebo up in the tower has a plaque in it for Bonnie Agnew to recognize her. I would be curious to know what the plans are for that particular gazebo. Is it going to be full of plaques, or is it a memorial? What's going to happen? Don't answer me now. I'm just throwing that out there. Thank you. Okay.
Anyone else?
Can I just,
I
really took 2 minutes, so I'm just gonna.
You can't.
30 sections.
You can't.
No.
I just going through the website, I might go in
Honestly,
and
everybody has 3 minutes, we've gotta be fair.
I thought you
It's
said it was
8:15,
No.
everybody
He said
here.
it's not.
Oh, I just wondered if there's a new strategic park district plan other than the lakefront thing. That's all. Can't find one. We're more than just a seasonal lakefront. That's all.
All right, we're gonna move on to board liaison.
You can talk for 2 hours.
I'll go, New Trier. They've hired a new director of campus safety. They've created a new position for campus safety for all of the campuses. This is a 21-year veteran of the Wilmette Police Force. So that's a new item. The Winnetech Campus Eastside Project is opening in August. They have a website devoted to that. You can go on website, and it's called East Side Project Presentation and East Side Project webpage. Student attendance has been a chronic problem. Full-time attendance, part-time attendance doesn't care, and so we're partnering with a variety of other North Shore high schools to see if they can help with some issues. They're starting the budgeting process for 23-24 school year, and that's all I have from here.
P36 has a board meeting next Tuesday. Usually it's before our board meeting, but it is very late in January. There was one point from the December meeting that there was some thought in the calendar committee that students would be returning after Labor Day. So I just wanted to make sure that people knew that that was a possibility and that you all got a draft of the calendar. I'm glad to see John nodding. This was a surprise.
I've had the conversation
Yeah,
with
okay,
representatives,
good.
thank you.
With respect to the village and intergovernmental cooperation, your elected officials, or elected bodies, including the village, the library, P36, New Trier, and Park District, we make it a point to try and get together monthly, the presidents of the board. We did so this morning, and we share what's going on between the agencies so that we can be aware and help cooperate and, solve problems in a mutual collaborative way that saves money. One such topic was the stormwater, where I want to say it again, through our intergovernmental cooperation, we are solving or helping solve the problem at a great savings and great additional capacity. It's a great example of intergovernmental cooperation. We are also collaborating with D36 and the village and the stormwater in Crow Island. And happy to report, if you haven't heard already, that the village was able to acquire the single-family home at the end of 1205 Sunset, or end of Sunset, 1205 Sunset. That was a necessary component to get the optimal routing for the storm sewer. And the intent, the hope and intent is that the village would, upon completion of the stormwater improvements, convey that land to the Park District, adding to the scale, adding to the open space and scale of the Crow Island Woods. And we're also cooperating with D36, providing land necessary for them to complete their expansion plans. So another example of intergovernmental cooperation. All right. Any other liaison reports? Staff reports? Anya?
Yeah, we had a foundation board meeting this past Monday, and we are recruiting members. There's 2 interested with a couple of others that JP and I will be interviewing with. We're looking for a date for the kickball tournament, so Kyle is going to look at the turf schedule to see, because that is absolutely booked, I think, for the most part. But we're going to try to finagle something there. We're going to be writing a grant for a transportation portion of one camp, the free camp that we're going to run in June. What else? The board is considering sponsoring the concert series for Wednesdays in the Woods. We're gonna get together with Jim to look at a budget for the foundation, and then they're gonna get back to us whether or not they will consider the concert series as a sponsorship for the foundation.
Thank you. Kyle?
Got a number of things going on currently for recreation. Specifically, we're preparing for the parent-child date night that is scheduled to take place in Michigan Shores Country Club. First time we've been in that venue, and there's a lot of excitement around that. That will be happening in February. We're also preparing for the middle school ski trip, heading up to Alpine in Wisconsin, Elk Grove, Wisconsin. We've got a fully packed trip set up right now. If there continues to be a greater interest on the wait list, we will consider expanding our transportation resources as we are able to do so. House League basketball is also continuing right now, and that is off and running very smoothly. Credit to our recreation supervisors and staff and part-time workers that are facilitating that. Had a lot of positive discussion recently on the topic of sailing. It is looking more and more likely that we will be able to offer some sailing opportunities at Lloyd during the summer of 2023. We are in contact with a sailing nonprofit organization that provides services to the area and is very excited by the use of, or the potential use of Lloyd Beach, which could create an opportunity for sailing instruction as well as facilitate bringing some of the local high school teams to operate out of Lloyd during the high school seasons. In addition to that, the fenced-in boat storage lottery is ongoing. The drawing for that lottery is February 15th. It'll be held in this room and also broadcasted via Zoom for anyone that is interested. As of my check this morning, I believe we had 47 lottery tickets purchased so far. Still a good deal of time available for purchasing. Again, the drawing will be on the 15th. I believe sales end on February 13th for lottery tickets. Gracie Durham is working on our spring brochure that's expected to release in February. The recreation staff, in the interest of getting greater feedback from the community from all of our various programming, is in the process of onboarding the Qualtrics platform for use by staff. That will give us capabilities of having feedback surveys after all of our programming as well as our events. We're also considering the use potential for a larger community pulse survey to see what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we can do better. So we are going to look into options once they're fully onboarded for that. And I think that wraps it up.
Great report, thank you, Kyle. Jim, anything?
A couple of things. We started our 2022 audit today. The auditors were here doing their preliminary field work. We will be working with them over the next 8 to 10 weeks. They asked for information, we'll report that to them. They'll have a field day here to wrap up their investigation in mid-March. So that's ongoing. And then on the human resources front, our new HR director, Beth, has been terrific. She's been setting up interviews for all of the vacant positions that we have. We're looking to fill one of our marketing positions very, very shortly, and we're going to start interviewing for an administrative position here next week. So that's been very busy getting those up and running.
Great. Costa?
Important, thank you. Those of you who might have seen, paddle tennis has been making great progress. The Mecca Platform Tennis has just about completed their work out there. There's a few standing punch list items that we're finishing up with them. And then the trades will jump in next to heat the courts up, if you will. We got gas pipe that needs to be run, as well as electric. Some work inside of the paddle hut itself to accommodate that with the additional work. We are anticipating that to happen here soon. We're excited to get that online. I did have a conversation with the village as far as temporary occupancy, so we will be able to get temporary occupancy as long as we meet some criteria that they will request. I suggest that because the paving season is probably about 2 months away to 3 months away, depending on how the weather is outside. So that our ability to get the pathways in surrounding the paddle courts is going to take a little bit longer than anticipated. But I assure you that we're working through that and trying to get that wrapped up as soon as possible, closed down for the members to enjoy. I know everybody's excited about it. There's a buzz around it, and we want to be able to get that open and operational. In addition to that, stormwater, they continue to work with the village of Winnetka, and what we've done thus far. We're excited to see the progress that's being made with Veo and their work on the course. Currently, they are still working on putting conveyance in, so they're working on the box culverts that will tie the two tributaries together from the par 3 conveyance to the ponds on the 18. So right now, they were working through where the 18th green used to be, and putting those box culverts in. We've had great communications around that, and continued dialogue with Kemper as far as the management oversight of that. Dave and I work on that together head to head, or together with each other to make sure that nothing is missed. We are currently looking at some different options as it relates to the green side bunkers, as presented by Kemper in their budget, to facilitate that work with potentially a third party. I know that was part of the adjustment that we had saw in the budget that kind of maybe took a couple people by surprise, because that work was initially suggested to take place in-house with value engineering to try to reduce that scope. But due to timing, costs, and delivery, we unfortunately are looking to outsource that to a third party. We have received some quotes. Unfortunately, there is a rather large delta between those. Lowest quote coming in at around $380,000 or $393,000 if memory serves, all the way to $697,000. We have investigated and we're looking through that. I'm going to also reach out to the village to see what that would look like as a change order request, to see where that comes in, because Wadsworth, the subcontractor to DeMayo, who did provide one of those quotes for us, noted that they were worried about the ability to perform that service in addition to the work that's on the course. We just want to make sure what we're programming is not going to have a effect on the delivery of the product as it relates to the project. So we're taking that very mindful of that, and we'll continue to as we progress. If we decide with those services, I had some discussions this afternoon with legal counsel to make sure what our purchasing authority is, especially with the new Kemper agreement. Not unfortunately, but with that taken into consideration, we would have to bid that work out if we do it independently versus as a change order. So we're going to be looking into both of those avenues and preparing the documents as needed to get that on the street and put that in the fair and competitive marketplace to see where those come in. Elder Centennial.
Can you pause on that? Can we
Sure.
share a question on that one?
Yeah.
So, I heard the presentation from Kemper, and I understood that Wadsworth was the low bidder.
We had since reached out to one other firm, Holland-Bain, who came in about, I think it was like $37,000 cheaper. So we have looked at that. Wadsworth did put a contingency as part of their proposal that their work would be secondary to the work that's already taking place on the course. There was some concern around that. Scheduling wise. So there's some worry around that.
Okay.
If they were not able to complete that in succession and we had to work into the course while the growth is happening, that's something we want to try to prevent against. So we're working diligently to work through that.
If I may offer one additional detail so that no commissioner is worried by what is budgeted currently. I believe for this project, we added in the $315,000 budget for that piece. Right now, the lowest bid is above that threshold. That does not include a bit of value engineering that is planned. That would allow that lowest bid to likely be, almost certainly be under the budgeted amount. So it is not a cause for concern. It's just where the initial.
Is there also contingency within the budget?
There's a little bit of contingency. To further Kyle's point, the cost for sand was included with the bid. The cost for sand and what the $315 additional was for labor. We built in the sand allotment separate because that was always part of the base bid for staff to do. So together between the two, you have $390,000 allocated for the project overall. Right now, we're expecting that to come in at around $290,000. Then with the sand being purchased and installed either by the owner or at least purchased by the owner at a possible reduction. There are all different opportunities in regards to sand and different mixes that are out there, let's prove it. So we're looking at some of those options as well based on some work that's been done in the field. So we're comfortable where we're at, but I just want to make sure that the board understands if you see a bid go out for sand work, or in this case, greenside bunker work, I just want to make sure everybody's understood where they're at as far as being communicating and making sure people are aware of where things are moving forward, especially as it relates to that project and the cost of what we expect that to be. So, any other questions on that one?
You'll keep us updated.
As that
advise us
progresses.
when we need to make decisions.
As that progresses, we'll definitely keep the board up to speed, especially with the allotment. Our abilities within our own purchase policy is up to $25,000 threshold, even though the state has an allotment up to $30,000 for purchasing. We still identify and in our policy observe the $25,000 threshold, which this would be far beyond, so hence the need to go out to a little bit.
Okay.
And last but not least, this is just a little something from me to the board. I've been working in this community for a long time, and I've always enjoyed working here. The privilege of working here as a high school student, when I was cutting greens on the golf course, waking up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning to get here at time was very hard. All the way to what I do now. I've never thought anything other than to do what's right. And I've always done as I've foreseen it, what I've been taught, what I've been told, what I've been educated on, and what I've done was always in the best interest of the Park District. This RFQ for Elder Centennial is no other. I looked at it as clean as I could, understanding the parameters that were asked upon staff. That information was then requested by Shavika to say, hey, if we pair with Red Barn, is that an opportunity where we can formally commit or not? We need to know, otherwise we're not going to submit a proposal. I checked, confirmed with legal. It was suggested that as long as Red Barn is the consultant and they're a sub-consultant, that meets that qualification. So, just like any other prospective bidder, I had to allow them to bid in the fair and open marketplace. That information came in. There was a panel of 7 individuals from Park District. It was very clear what expectations were as far as follow the RFQ, the qualifications, review, and give me your honest opinion. And that information is looking back. I will suggest that what we saw for the interviews, I did not expect to see what we saw. 2 of the firms that I thought would be front runners, unfortunately, did not perform as anticipated. And I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I was very disappointed to see what came in with those results. And it's with that earnest and my respect for the Park District and this Park Board that I will always put my best foot forward, and I will continue to put my best foot forward. And I will suggest that I don't need any praise. It's not me that does the work. It's the entire Park District staff as a whole that makes this Park District and this agency great. And that's been my support of staff relentlessly from day one, is that it's the staff that makes the Park District and makes it great. And if you can perform the staff and you can get them operating at the level, the rest of that falls in place. So I appreciate the praise and all the kind words and the support, people, feeling that they have to stand up for me. But truly, it's a privilege to serve this community, and I will have to push that on to the staff that supports me, as well as all my peers that I work with. That's the people that really deserve the respect and the support. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Coach. May I have a motion to go into closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C1, for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body. 5 ILCS 120, Section 2C5, for the purchase or lease of property. 5 ILCS 120-2C6, the setting of a price for the sale or lease of property. And 5 ILCS 120-2C11, for litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Archambault?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
Yes.
Commissioner Rapp?
Yes.
Commissioner Root?
Yes.
Commissioner Koto?
Yes.
Commissioner James?
Yes.
Motion passes. 8:32 p.m.